I left Killarney relatively early in the morning, heading out through the Killarney National Park. It was a really lovely way to start my day, even though the weather was a bit cool and misty. I made it to the Gap of Dunloe, which was perhaps my favourite road in Ireland, before the traffic could really pick up. As always, although I'm going to release a separate supercut of the Gap of Dunloe, I'm going to include the best footage in this video. Although I want to give this driver props for braking while I overtook, they may well have just been slowing down for the corner. Either way, this lakeside stretch was calm and peaceful, just what I needed to start my day. Coming around this corner, we had another moment that still makes me wince. Since the tarmac had been good so far, I was going at a decent clip when this shoddy repair job reared its ugly head. I was mid-lean, which is the worst time to have sudden changes in the road surface. I won't get into the physics, but essentially the bike is most stable when it's upright and easiest to lose control when you're leaning. In the moment, of course, I dealt with the situation and moved on. The reason I'm mentioning this is for the non-riders. When you're in a car, you don't have to pay nearly as much attention to the condition of the road. The consequences are also much lower. Something that might only jostle you around in a car might seriously destabilize a bike. I'm going to increase the playback speed here to 2 times. While I really enjoyed this section of road, I was also stuck behind some pretty slow cars. When I saw that little tunnel, I thought it was pretty cool, so I pulled over to take some photos. This also had the added benefit of giving some space to the cars in front of me so I could hopefully enjoy the next stretch at my own pace. I will admit, my last video was somewhat negative. One reason I wanted to create this series though was to accurately tell the story of my trip, and it would be a disservice to pretend everything was perfect and lovely all the time. At this point, I'd been away from home for 2 weeks, so the reality of my trip was finally sinking in. Things weren't difficult so much as consistently frustrating, so I started to get a bit homesick. But once I got over that hump, I was perfectly fine for the rest of the trip. I'd expected this to happen. It can be tough to keep going once the novelty wears off. But even in a relatively low period for me personally, my route still took me through some pretty nice places. But between the homesickness and the actual sickness I caught 2 days later, it was a tough time to do such a hard day's ride. I did 2 big loops. Either the Ring of Kerry or the Ring of Bheara could have filled a day on its own, and I did both in 1 day. So by the time evening came round, I was completely exhausted. Looking back though, I have a certain degree of pride that I actually managed to survive the whole day despite everything. Nonetheless, I ended up behind those cars again just a couple of minutes later. Fortunately, a car further up was turning into a parking lot, which gave me a chance to nip past the whole column of traffic. Just after Moll's Gap, I turned off onto a side road toward the Gap of Dunloe. The shape of the road was really nice. It was downhill and there were some really nice bends and curves to it. The only downside is just how bumpy this road was. Which taught me a really important lesson. Just because something looks good on the map doesn't mean it necessarily will be as good as you think, because the road conditions might not be good. Even after I got onto a slightly more established road, it didn't get a whole lot better. There were more hills up and down, and the bends were tighter, which was fun, but I hardly got out of second gear. And here's a friendly reminder to go slowly around blind corners because other cars will jump scare you. Here we come to the Gap of Dunloe. Because it was so quiet, I stopped off for a minute at the top to take some photos before heading off. The Gap of Dunloe starts really strong with 4 hairpins in quick succession. When I saw that bridge, I stopped off for another brief photo shoot. I caught this kid staring, so I decided to give him just a little rev bomb as I rode past. This was a really nice moment when I turned off of the bridge to see the road winding along next to the lake. By now, you've probably noticed that the road was a bit messy in places. There are horse-drawn carts that bring tourists up and down the road, and horses aren't exactly known for cleaning up after themselves. Here was my first encounter with one of those horse-drawn carts. As I approached the other end, the Gap of Dunloe got a whole lot busier. There were a lot more pedestrians and cyclists, as well as oncoming cars and the horse-drawn carts. Cruising along, minding my own business, and when I tried to brake for that corner, my rear wheel slipped. When the horse poo got smeared out over the road, it turned into a big slick patch that temporarily made me lose traction when I was braking through it. Just another reminder to be cautious, I suppose. It was fun to let loose a little on this coastal road. These sorts of side roads are more what I expected from Ireland. They're narrow and twisty and almost overgrown by the woods. the Ring of Bheara too, other than the giant rows of potholes right in my tyre track, of course. You'll see this a bit more clearly in the next clip, but some places in the Ring of Bheara felt like riding through a hedge maze. It was very cool. A couple of hours later, my Nemeses made a return as I was riding through the Healy Pass. That's right, the sheep were back. In all seriousness, as long as you're paying attention and slow down to give them plenty of space, sheep aren't too bad. Heh, bad. Anyway, I just still can't get over that one sheep in the North York Moors that ran out in front of me like I had a death wish. And in the whole 12 weeks I was away, that was the only sheep that did anything at all like that. Wildlife, or well, not so wildlife, aside, I quite enjoyed the Healy Pass. The road had some really nice bends in, and crucially they weren't too tight. Although I go on a lot about twisties, sometimes if a road is too twisty, you can't maintain any speed through it and it becomes a lot less fun. I was so ready to sweep around this corner with some speed, and then I saw the sheep, so I slowed right down. Maybe that's the supercut we really need. The stunning vistas and longer cuts of scenic routes don't matter at all. What's more important is documenting my ongoing war against sheep. Every time they ruin a corner, it's a defeat. Every rev bomb is a victory. What do you think, Internet? Do your thing. After cresting the pass, there was immediately a really scenic view, so of course I pulled over, again, to get more photos. What's the point in being there if you don't document it, right? Just look at that view though, and it was even better in person. Of course, just because I was reaching the end of my day's riding doesn't mean that interesting things stopped happening. Even though I was stuck behind some cars going through it, I thought the tunnel near Kenmare was really cool. You don't see too many tunnels in Ireland, so I appreciated the rare change of scenery. Just as I made it past the last car, the perfect song came on to boost my energy at the end of a long day. Through the Fire and Flames by Dragon Force. If you know, you know. For those that don't, Through the Fire and Flames is a 7-minute anthem of high-octane speed metal that's absolutely perfect for blasting through these kinds of curves at these kinds of speeds. As much as I wish I could play the song over this footage, I don't really know how YouTube works, and I don't want to risk copyright strikes, so you'll have to look it up on your own or just imagine. Here I am a couple of minutes later, rocking out in my helmet to the Twin Solos and looking out for the sign for the hostel that I'm supposed to be staying in for the night. I didn't realise that there was a hostel before the one I was staying at, so I turned in for the first sign I saw thinking that that was the one. Let's recap the situation. After a very long day of riding, I'd finally pulled into Glengarriff where I'd booked a room for the night. I was tired and generally feeling a bit under the weather, so my relief was palpable. But between the music and the roads leading into Glengarriff, I was in a pretty good mood. All I needed to do was find the hostel, and the sign was right there, and I could finally kick back and relax. Yeah, then that happened. I didn't just drop my bike, I dropped my bike in front of the wrong place entirely, so I had to pick it back up, reload all of the things I'd taken off, and then continue down the road another 5 minutes to actually get to the place I was staying.